Alright, so I know I promised you a theory about the unusual Moonspire statues as the next Steven Universe theory, but there's something I just need to talk about. It's a thing I heard about recently, and I just can't stop thinking about it. It's just eating away at my brain. I need to talk about it in order to get it out so that I can think about other things again. Like, did you guys know that apparently gems are solar powered? Like, this is a thing that was explicitly said by, I think it was specifically Rebecca Sugar who said it, not long after the show ended, apparently, and I just missed it. And I'm going to preface this video by saying I'm making this in good fun. I'm going to seem really frustrated throughout this video, and I'm not going to lie and say that I'm not frustrated at all by this particular revelation, because I am. I'm playing it up a little bit for the camera. I'm not actually mad at the crew. I still love the crew. I think they're some of the most talented people on any show ever, right? I'm playing up how annoyed I am for the camera a little bit. All of that said, though, that legitimately doesn't make any sense. And that's not to say that I'm denying this as canon, right? The closest thing to actual canon we have at this point is what comes out of the mouth of the showrunner, of Rebecca Sugar herself. It seems like this is canon. It was always intended to be canon. In fact, even more recently, I think, I'm not 100% sure of the timeline of this, but I think even more recently she even said that she had planned at some point to release an episode where we found out what happens if a gem is outside of direct light for too long. So clearly this is the intention. This isn't like a J.K. Rowling after the fact silly addition to canon kind of thing. It was always intended to be true. So I'm not denying this is canon just because it doesn't make sense. And not just to me. I'm arguing here that it doesn't make sense in general. I want to be clear about that. And at the same time, as much as this does annoy me, annoyed even is probably too strong a word, really, IRL. This isn't like when we found out that Rose was actually Pink Diamond. A decision which, while it opened up interesting storytelling possibilities, I still to this day assert was a mistake, as it genuinely harmed my like for this character. I think it genuinely, irreparably harmed the character of Rose and how much we as a general audience can enjoy her as a admittedly fictional person. This, though, would have just been an oddity. I would have explained it away and moved on with it if it had shown up in the show itself. So like I said, I'm just trying to get all of my annoyance with this off my chest and move on. So today, for today's, it's not even really a theory, but sort of theory video, I'm going to be going over why I think this was a really, really dumb choice for where the gems get their power. And this is going to be kind of rambly. I don't really have a structure for this thing. I'm just going to be going over some of the points that I have. I'm not even going to probably go over all of them, because I just have so many. Let's start, though, with what I think is probably the biggest one, and that's that gems had to get their initial charge from somewhere. And yet gems are formed entirely beneath the ground, out of direct light of any kind. So where do gems get their initial charge for their first formation and the subsequent actions that they take once they have first formed, if they're solar powered? Like, you could argue that maybe they're also able to energize themselves by drawing in ambient heat from things around them, and they draw in heat from the ground as it is heated by the sun. But first of all, gems are formed in big valleys, which make it hard for the sun to get down there in the first place to heat the ground. And also, it just seems really inefficient, doesn't it, to have two different power sources? Like, gems can do a lot. Those little gemstones can do a lot, but there's only so much room for tech in that physical space. Eventually, you're going to run out of something. It's like, it was already stretching credibility that gems can do so much with those little things. This just stretches it even more. Assuming that they do have two power sources anyway. Though, if they can also power themselves off of heat energy, that kind of explains how the gems in the burning room, if gems are solar powered, weren't slowly dying. Something that the crystal gems would have known was happening to them because they're also gems. Because the burning room is called the burning room for a reason. There's a lava pit directly beneath the bubbled gems, which would have given off plenty of ambient heat. Still, it just seems really odd to me that whether gems are somehow natural or whether they're technological, that they would be solar-powered creatures that gestate in total darkness underground. If they're purely technological, if somebody designed them, then that is a major design flaw. And if they're natural, there is no way in hell a creature would have evolved that way. It just doesn't make sense. And this is all completely ignoring the fact that gems apparently originated on Homeworld, which I'm going to put some images up here over myself talking here. It's probably the only images and or footage I'm going to use in this whole video, honestly. But I don't think Homeworld has a sun. Like, looking at it from a distance, we don't see one. Looking at it from the surface, we never see one, at least as far as I can tell, looking through old screenshots. The closest thing I actually found was this structure here, but the fact that the sky is still dark above and around it suggests that it's more likely a moon of some kind, or maybe even a gem structure, than a star. And even later when we see the planet lit up, because usually it's like perpetually night there, but later when we see it lit up, we still see stars in the sky, implying that the light we're seeing is light pollution from the planet below, not light coming from above. So does Homeworld have a sun? And if it doesn't, then this makes even less sense than I already thought. Then there's the question of, how can gems be spacefaring creatures and also be solar powered? If they're designed to spend long periods of time in space, sometimes even in the vast starless void between galaxies, how can they possibly be solar powered? How much charge can a gemstone hold? Because something that's solar powered can only charge itself at a speed relative to how much surface area it has. And gemstones are small. They can't possibly charge themselves quickly at all via contact with light from a star. And they certainly wouldn't be able to get a charge from distant stars. That's just utterly ridiculous to even consider. So must every gem spend thousands of years on a planet with a sun, charging up before they can go on a long space voyage? Because I know gems can like wormhole drive around, but that's only worthwhile if you're going from one place that you know to another place that you know. A gem out scouting for new planets would have to go at like regular sublight speeds so that they can see the planets and survey the planets, right? You can't just wormhole to a place you've never been. And going around at sublight speeds takes a long freaking time. This also raises the question of, what do gems use to power their technology? Because I'm going to take it back to Lapis Lazuli's mirror for a second. We can infer from the way the other gems reacted to finding out that the mirror had a mind of its own, that at the very least sapient gems aren't used to power technology. Now, sapient gems are just used as like walls and combs and maybe statues, which is a whole other thing. But at the very least, they're not used to power technology, because even though it was expected that the mirror could answer questions, it was a complete surprise to the other crystal gems when they found out that it could answer questions as a thinking being. And yet they weren't surprised that there was a gemstone powering the mirror, which tells me, through the power of deduction, just call me Sherlock Holmes, that non-sapient, non-thinking gemstones, manufactured specifically to be power sources, are used as power sources. And that makes sense, because the crystal heart seems to just be a giant gem, and similar structures to it seem to power gem ships, and we see gemstones embedded in consoles sometimes. It just makes sense, based on the visual evidence, that non-thinking gemstones are used as batteries by Gem Society. But they would need to charge the same way. If they're the same tech, just without the sapient brain, they would need to charge the same way, which means to power a ship, you would need to leave that crystalline core that's supposed to be the core of the ship out in the sun. You'd have to take it out of the ship or else open the ship up and leave it out in the sun for an extended period of time just to charge up enough energy to get that ship going for a while. It also means that the crystal heart would have to have some way to periodically expose itself to the sun, and I just don't see how that could be possible. There's also the issue that the surface of the gemstone would have to be the solar collector, right? There's no other part of it that could be the solar collector, but we already know what the surface of a gem does. It projects light. Everything but the top part of the gem projects a holographic body, and the top part of the gem can project beams of light, like flashlight beams. Or in Pearl's case, holograms, like detailed holographic images. And I guess if they somehow made a transparent solar collector, they could put a light projector behind it. But, and maybe I'm not super well versed on how solar panels work, wouldn't shining other light through the other side of a solar collector interfere with its ability to solar collect? And that's not even mentioning how this screws up one of the earliest details that we got about gem physiology, the fact that gems don't change with the passage of time, which just blatantly isn't true. If a gem is actively powered by something that is not continuously renewable, something that it has to be re-exposed to in order to restore its charge, then gems do change with the passage of time. Even if they're constantly absorbing more energy, they're still burning off what energy they already had. So they are changing with the passage of time, physically changing with the passage of time. But even if you argue that that doesn't really count, that they would only change with the passage of time if they're out of direct light for a long period of time and can't continuously recharge, I can think of a theoretical, conceivable version of a person who doesn't change with the passage of time under certain conditions, like really good high-tech stasis or something. A person under really good high-tech sci-fi Star Trek Voyager stasis wouldn't change with the passage of time under those conditions, but that doesn't mean that as a general rule, humans don't change with the passage of time. Again, physically, because obviously, and it was obvious even at that point, the gems do change mentally and emotionally with the passage of time. We're just talking the physical side here. I could keep going. I really could, probably for another hour. But I'm not. I'm going to drop it here. I'm just going to say one last thing. I'm going to say, I get it. I get them wanting to tell us where gems get their power from. And quite frankly, my explanation for where gems get their power isn't much better than this. It's also pretty freaking dumb. But at the very least, it avoided some of these problems. I guess I just don't understand why they couldn't have just left it ambiguous. Why did we need to know where gems get their power from? If this was going to be the answer, if anything really was going to be the answer, because nothing really makes sense when gems can do all the things that they do, all of which take energy, mind you. Point is, I just don't understand why we needed to know this. I don't understand why it couldn't have been left ambiguous, but that's it. I'm going to drop it and move on. I am, from this point forward, just going to shrug my shoulders and ignore how much this actually annoys me. All of that said, and I promise I do want to know the answer to this question, what do you guys think of the idea that gems are solar powered? Let's get a discussion going in the comment section down below, or over my Discord in the Steven Universe section, link in the description. But either way, this has been AJ22, and I will talk to you guys later.